Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC. And today we are going to explore some ideas and practices that can keep you alive for longer if and when a TEOTWAWKI or SHTF event occurs. So that's right, we're going to be talking about different food preservation techniques that don't require electricity or refrigeration. And this is age-old knowledge. We're going old school here. This is some very cool, old school, traditional ways to preserve food. And some of these I knew about, but going through them, Chris, there's actually a lot that I didn't.
Yeah, I learned a ton doing the research for this, and you're 100% right. A lot of these techniques are hundreds or even thousands of years old. Some of them we don't know how old they are. And some of them are more recent inventions that you can get from Amazon. Doing the research for this, I found out a ton of information that I didn't know. So that includes some information about my own dehydrator. Some of these you may already know, you may use regularly. Some you may want to get into, but I can nearly guarantee that you don't know all of these techniques. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely true. There's so much information out there. So this will be a little bit condensed, but we will have links, obviously, like we always do, on our blog and on our website. So you can learn a lot more about these. You can buy some of these products just to get you started, and then start saving food long term. And also, I mean, once you have that initial investment of things like a food dehydrator, then obviously you can actually save money with this. I mean, you can actually just preserve your food. This isn't just in case the end of the world happens, but just different ways to preserve food, making banana chips and stuff, man. You can actually take food that you were going to throw out and you can preserve it. So this is for everybody. This isn't just for the, prepper with your basement full of ball mason jars and stuff like that. We have already talked about food items under $1 that are worth having on hand. So we aren't necessarily going to touch on that stuff again, but let's start off with something you can just kind of purchase immediately if you have in your budget, and then just store foods for 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, and the extended shelf life, the 25-year shelf life foods, things like Food for Patriots buckets, ReadyWise, Mountain House, things like that, the commercially available freeze-dried foods. The real benefit of having those is they are pre-packed, and generally they're pretty well balanced meals that really all you need is water to reconstitute it. It's not a difficult process. Because most of them are freeze-dried, they do tend to be super lightweight and easy to throw into your pack or under the back seat if you're traveling, something like that. They are far less susceptible to temperature variations. So if you've got it in hot environments, cold environments, constantly shifting back and forth, there's not going to be as much of a problem if it's a freeze-dried food item. And they are super easy to use or prepare. But kind of the downside about those 25-year shelf life foods is for all of the convenience, there's always that downside. These meals can be expensive unless you're buying in bulk, and they can kind of be difficult to find in stock. If a lot is going on in the world or with supply chains or things like that, it can be tough to find 25-year shelf life foods that aren't on back order for 4 or 5 months. It's
100%.
just tough.
100%. And I have quite a few of these. I buy these on Amazon and on Costco a lot. If you have a Costco membership, just wait. Costco always has this stuff on sale. And yeah, you're right. There are some downsides. And they can be expensive, but a couple of the other downsides, honestly, is one, they're kind of bland, dude. They taste like salt and noodles. Like pretty much 90% of that stuff is salt and noodles. I would say that nutrient survival, I kind of like those ones the best, but they're on the more expensive side than the other, you know, 5-gallon buckets or the number 10 cans you see. And the one thing that, you know, you didn't mention is they take a ton of energy to prepare. This isn't just opening up a bucket and shoving a spoon in and feeding your family. It's, if you look at like some of the camping foods where it's add boiling water, let it sit for 5 minutes, boom, you're ready to go, like the Mountain House. And those are very expensive. But those traditional 25-year shelf life foods, those are like, the instructions are boil on the stove for 30 minutes or something like that.
Yes.
That's a ton of energy. It really is. The amount of energy it takes to turn those buckets into food is pretty tough. So just think about that. And then there's also like MREs, right? And
Yes. The gold
again,
standard.
good old standard. But MREs, there's a couple of things about MREs. One, very expensive. Two, kind of an unknown shelf life. They're like, oh, it's got a 3-year inspection date on it, but I don't know. I'm not certified to inspect MREs, so you really don't know where those would have been, how long you can properly store those. And then, Chris, you can probably vouch for this, but you actually can't just survive on MREs. Like, I think there's actually a rule in the Army. They're like 45 days or something, and yeah, you're just like pooping bricks and you can die. Like, you can't eat MREs forever, right?
So MREs are designed to be sustained nutrition and balanced nutrition in combat operations, austere environments without a dedicated or continuous supply chain. They are
Mhm.
designed to last. So in that aspect, they are a very solid choice, but they do have some downsides on the nutrition side as well. If you eat them for about 2 weeks, in most cases, just nothing but MREs, you're going to have some gastrointestinal issues. You're going to have some backing
Right.
up of the works. It's not going to
Yep.
want to come out. MRE packs actually do come with a gum, and it is a laxative gum. So if you talk
Oh, is
to a
that
veteran,
true? Is that what that is? The little
it
gum in there, the
is.
little Tic Tac looking thing?
Yes,
I
it
didn't
is a
know that.
laxative. So if you talk to somebody who's familiar with MREs or a veteran or something like that and ask about the MRE gum, you're going to get some weird looks. Don't eat the gum. Don't eat the gum. It's because it's a laxative
I had
and
no
it's
idea.
effective.
And I think along those lines, again, this might just be a dad fact. I'm not sure if this is true. My buddy who's a Marine told me this, that, you know, they all have the little bottle of Tabasco in them. And I think that may aid a bit in digestion too. But I think Tabasco was invented / founded by a Marine. I think that's why those are in there. Have you heard
It
that?
wouldn't surprise me,
I
but I
want
haven't heard that.
I want to look it up. My buddy told me that like the Tabasco guy was a Marine and he was like a Sea Rats guy, and he was like, these are terrible. We got to spice these up a bit, and that's why there's a little bottle of Tabasco in the MREs. But yeah, absolutely. You know, they're kind of bland, but they are very, very expensive too, right? I mean, if you're getting brand new ones, not the one you find on Amazon that says it's new, but it's actually been in storage for 3 years, and they're the military pull downs. I think that's something you need to watch out when you're buying MREs, is that you can buy them anywhere, but they say they're new because they're unused. But a lot of those,
they're new old stock.
they're new old stock, right? The reason they're cheaper is because the military cycles them out every 3 years and then sells them at GSA auctions. So just be careful about it. Be cognizant that you're buying 3-year-old food when you buy new MREs, and I'm using quotation fingers, unless you go to like Costco. Costco usually has like the X MREs or the blue label MREs that are basically the same military stuff. Sometimes they don't have heaters in them or things like that. But unless you're buying literally new, most of that stuff you find is new old stock. And I think you do need to be conscious of that.
If you are lucky enough to find them at a GSA auction, then you're getting a deal though. So
Oh,
that's
100%.
certainly a way that you can cut down on your costs for prepping. But Some of the other kind of differences here are that the 25-year shelf life stuff is all freeze dried, it's prepackaged, it's got the O2 absorbers in it and everything like that. The MRE, meal ready to eat, it is not freeze dried. It does have plenty of preservatives and it's sealed and everything like that, but it's designed to tear open that package and shove a spoon in and go. All of the liquid, all of the grease, all of the anything that makes it a meal is part of that package. So you don't
And
have to do any preparation if you don't have time.
and that makes it heavy as well, right?
It does. They tend to be a bit heavier. They are still easy to break down, shove into cargo pockets, shove into the back of a pack or under a seat or something like that. But they are a little bit heavier on foot. So something to consider. And MREs may not be in your wheelhouse. You may have other solutions that works, but just talking about options, MREs probably closer to a 10-year shelf life. The long-term storage stuff, we're looking at 25, but cost versus benefit versus weight versus prep time, all of that has
Sure.
to get factored in. So I do want to talk about our next ones, and we're going to start with some of the ones that do require electricity to get going and then kind of move into the more primitive or natural methods. And here's the thing that all of these techniques have in common, though. They all require some type of preparation. This is food storage and preservation, not eating the random berries and twigs that you find on the ground. And for your own sake, if you aren't sure what it is, don't eat it. Just, I mean, wild carrots and Queen Anne's lace look extremely similar. One of them will feed you, the other will put you 6 feet under. So kind of understand if you're just eating berries and twigs, you could be causing yourself some problems.
Yeah, I had read. I want to say this might be an Army field manual tip, but there's nothing in North America that looks like a blueberry that can kill you. Like a blueberry looking thing, generally safe. I know there's some weird ones like juniper, but dude, juniper doesn't look like a blueberry. You can tell. But a lot of those things, the wild blueberries and the huckleberries and those kinds of things, generally pretty safe. But yeah, that's exactly it. After we talked about I want to say is the urban bug out
Okay.
episode, or maybe it was the weird, I can't remember which one it was. You had mentioned a trifold, you know, poison and
Oh,
foods you
the quick
w-
identification
quick
cards?
the quick identification card. I bought one of those and it's very cool. Like that's a very easy thing to use, and you can just look at something that looks like a fruit and very easily identify like, yep, that is Oregon blueberry or whatever it is, and whether it's edible or not. But you're right, there are some things that look very much like food, like deadly nightshade, and it is not. So,
And that's where those cards are lightweight, they're small, they're critical information. They're actually fun to use if you kind of go through and on your nature walk or your
yep,
hike or whatever. Oh, blueberry. Oh, juniper. Oh,
right.
that one I don't want to touch. General rule of thumb: leaves of three, let it be. Poison oak, poison sumac, poison ivy. They all have three lobed leaves, and they're in clusters of three. Just leave it alone because that
Don't eat
applies
those.
to so many other things too.
That's right. And those little cards are laminated like the My Topo map. So then yeah, it's just you can get it wet and you can keep going. But anyway, let's kick this one off. The first one I want to talk about, and I don't have one of these, is the home freeze dryer. These are pretty expensive, but I think this would just pay for itself in droves like forever. This is a very cool thing. So, um, they're actually really awesome machines, and it's kind of like a wonder of technology that somebody invented this and you can have this at home. But they work by creating this huge vacuum of negative pressure, which pulls all the water out of the food, leaving just simply the solid food behind. This obviously requires electricity to operate, and I'm guessing probably quite a bit. But if you get one and you can basically custom build entire meals to eat later and reconstitute, kind of like your own 25-year shelf life stuff. So fruits, grains, ice cream, if it's got water in it, it can be freeze dried. I've seen the freeze dried Skittles. You ever had those?
I haven't had those.
Mind blowing. They're amazing. It's crazy. I don't know. I didn't know there was like enough water in Skittles to change the candy, but pretty cool.
That's kind of wild. The astronaut ice cream is just freeze dried ice cream
It
bars.
it is. I never knew that. Like I always ate those little things as a kid. Like you'd go to like the some science museum and you'd always get the little ice cream
Uh-huh.
bar. I didn't know that it was a legit just dehydrated ice cream. They're like, oh, it's astronaut ice cream. No, they're really good. But yeah, you could do that on your own, and again, kind of lasts forever. I've even seen like the spaghetti with like meat portioned out and freeze dried, and then you can store it in your little individual like vacuum sealed packs. So that's really cool. You can do tomatoes and turn them into like a dry powder and then use that for a base of a sauce later. And all you have to do is just add water, stir, and then it just sort of reconstitutes itself and looks like tomato sauce. So the biggest downside here is going to be the initial cost of the machine itself. So you can see them on Amazon, but these could easily be 4 or 5, 6,000 bucks depending on the model. So they're very expensive. But if you had one of these, this is kind of it. Like you are making your own dehydrated food forever. Anything you have left over, you're like those bananas are going to go bad if we don't eat them. Boom, throw them in the machine and they're freeze dried, and they will last an insanely long time. The
Yes.
other downside is they aren't all that big, so you kind of have to do multiple stages of food prep in order to complete that meal. Unless you get just some giant $20,000 machine, they're small. So if you think about the pasta, you have to do the pasta separately and then do the sauces separately and all that kind of stuff. So it is a process to do it. But once you have the freeze dryer and some Mylar bags, you're just good to go as long as those supplies last. If you think about anything in the garden, I do this all the time where I have a nice garden every year, and then there's things I like to do. I like to do a hot sauce. I like to do a tomato sauce. There's certain things I like to do. But so much of that food, either because it's ugly and has bad presentation, or it all shows up at once. Like pears are a perfect example. There is a 4-day period in like July when I get 8 million pears. And that's it. So I eat 3 pears, and then the yellow jackets eat the rest of the pears, and then it just smells like booze in my backyard for a month. So if you had something like this, you could take those, you could freeze dry those pears, and yeah, they will last virtually forever. The one thing I do is the juicer is one thing you could do
Okay.
as well. I do that a lot where I'll take the stuff like that, I can juice it and then freeze that. But again, then you still have to maintain a freezer, which takes energy. So the cool thing about this is just that when you have the freeze dryer, then you don't need anything else. Freeze dry it, lasts forever. You can reconstitute it, heat it up. So big money, but you're literally making your own survival food that will last nearly indefinitely.
And the cool thing about it is, one, freeze dried pears sound amazing,
I just thought of that, and I'm like, I kind of want to buy a freeze dryer now.
right?
Yeah.
But two, if you've got all of this food that is homemade meals, the nutritional content of it, it's your style. So if you like really spicy foods, or if you like more bland foods, or somewhere in the middle, if you wanted a Southern Italian spaghetti versus a Northern Italian spaghetti, you could label them differently.
Sure.
And then if they're all prepackaged in individual meal size, if one person wants spaghetti and the other wants meatloaf, or stroganoff or whatever, you can pick those individual meals instead of having to open up the whole package that often comes in those bucket foods, and everybody is forced to eat the same thing. Now you can say, all right, you wanted something a little bit more savory, you want something a little bit more spicy. Let's grab one of the fajitas and one of the beef stroganoff, and now we can sit down and eat together, and both of us are happy.
That's actually a really good point because yeah, for those that don't own these 25-year shelf life meals, or the people at least um, that haven't used them, because I have opened them up and eaten them. I know which ones I like and which ones I don't. But you're right. Every one of those packs in there is like 5 or 10 servings. So you're just committing to whatever that is. If you're doing your own, then you can make these little individual servings, and then you're not eating into the shelf life of it when you open it up. You open the one serving up and eat it versus opening up the bag of 10 servings, and then you've got to eat those or they're going to go bad.
Right. And along the same lines as the freeze dryer, but significantly cheaper to get started into, I do want to talk about a home dehydrator. Now, we actually have one of these, and we've made some pretty tasty things from it. Because a dehydrator works using heat and air circulation to kind of evaporate the water out of the food. So it doesn't completely remove the water like a freeze dryer. So you don't get the same longevity out of it, but you can easily get 5 years out of some of the things that you store in Mylar bags with like a oxygen absorber or something like that. And there's a lot of things that you can preserve in a dehydrator, not just beef jerky or venison or whatever. So I know we have made fruit leather, kind of like all natural fruit roll ups. I think we did blackberry, strawberry, and orange and mixed all of them together, made it into like a sweet paste, and then just laid it on butcher block paper.
Yeah, I was gonna say like a wax paper. I know that's something you kind of need to have in stock if you're going to use one of these, right? You need to have the kind of paper it'll like stick to the base, right?
Exactly. And then once it becomes sticky, you just kind of cut it and roll it up. Dehydrated blueberries and strawberries are a great snack. Pineapple chunks are amazing when you dehydrate them because they get this sugary crust on them. The longer these go, the more water gets evaporated. And same thing for freeze drying. So they can get brittle if they're overdone. But you don't want to do that for too long because you can basically end up with dust. But if you are trying to do something like powdered eggs or tomato powder or even shelf stable herbs from your garden, you might want to look into a dehydrator or a freeze dryer. Dehydrators, they tend to run between 150 and 500 depending on model, and you can usually find them on Amazon with next day delivery. So significantly cheaper. You are giving up some of that shelf life, but you can make some pretty awesome stuff for daily snacks, not just your long term storage, but your office snack that you take in, and instead of spending money at the cafeteria, you're saving yourself money with something that's actually healthy.
Yeah, I've done in the dehydrator. I have a couple different ones. I have kind of like the cheap one that's basically like it's like a hair dryer that goes down through these layers. And then I have like a fancier one that looks like a little mini oven. And the only thing I've really done is jerky, and that was more just out of necessity. Like I bought like some, it was like a multi-steak pack. And so I was grilling steaks one day and then had just meat left over. I was like, let's try to do some muscle cut jerky. It was delicious, and you can do it yourself, and you don't have to use all the weird preservatives that are in jerky, because there is some weird stuff in jerky. So doing your own was cool. The downside obviously is it's not going to last as long as that prepackaged store-bought jerky with all the weird sulfites and crap they put in there. But you can store it in the fridge after you do it. It's actually really good. I was
It
really
is.
impressed. Yeah.
And obviously, both a freeze dryer and a food dehydrator, they do require electricity to operate and run. So that's your pre-planning preparation, food
Yep.
preservation. Let's go a little bit more old school, AC, with your next one. So this one
Sure.
can be done without any sort of electricity.
That's right. Yeah. If we go back way further in the time machine, canning is the process of preserving foods with or without liquids. And it's actually really picked up in popularity in recent years. I'm sure if you go down to any of the grocery stores, you'll see there's always these big stocks of the ball mason jars, because people are getting into canning a lot more. And I've done a little bit of this myself. It's actually really cool. It's a very easy way to do it. There's two basic methods to doing this. There's like your hot canning and your cold canning. So hot canning means that you're heating up the food, usually to boiling, Sometimes you have to go hotter than boiling. So the kit that you'll buy, you can see these on Amazon, has like a little mini pressure cooker for the hot bath canning. So certain foods that have to get hotter than boiling, you put them in this pressure cooker type thing. Like the jars themselves go in there, and then it's got a little cool tool so you can pull it out without burning yourself. But there's some great kits to buy, and you just bring it really hot before sealing the jar. And as it cools, then the jar creates this vacuum, and you'll hear the little dunk out of that little ball mason jar, and then it's sealed under its own sort of pressure differential, and all the air can't get into the jar as long as that seal doesn't fail. And you'll know if it does because you can push on it. So if you push on that little top and it makes that little sound, then you know the seal has failed. So that's just a cool little self check. That's your little press check on the ball mason jar. But
Side note on that, real quick side note on that.
Yeah.
The dogs have learned that we have those little training clickers.
Oh, yep.
And the dogs have learned that anytime a new jar opens and they hear that pop, they think it's the clicker, so they come over for
no
treat.
kidding. It sounds the
And
same.
it's hilarious.
That dunk dunk dunk, like that's hilarious. Yeah, they know
Yep.
they know the sound, of course. Yeah. But using that sort of hot canning method, you can often get better color, better texture, better flavor, and generally a pretty long storage life because there's less air in the jar. And it's easy to do, but if it gets hot, like if you're in an area where in SHTF your air conditioning might fail and it could get over 100 degrees, that's going to be really bad for these hot canned foods. So that's why obviously people had like root cellars. That was the whole point, that you could keep stuff cooler and you're not going to have any of your hot canning fail. Anyway, the other way, this cold canning, on the other hand, the food is packed into jars raw and then sealed either by pressure canning or in like that hot water bath. And this tends to be better for things like, I don't know, tomatoes, the fruits, potatoes, spinach, pretty much anything other than meat. If things are cold canned, they may also have a bit of a tendency to float in the liquid of the jar, and then that'll cause them to discolor over time. So if you're looking to get into canning either method, you certainly do some research, but there's some really cool entire kits you can buy on Amazon. I bought mine on Amazon that came with this pressure thing and pretty much everything except the jars, because you want to pick your own size of jar based on what you're doing. But also make sure to pay attention to time and temperature requirements because it's different for everything. So, your hot pack stuff, pretty good for meats. Your cold pack stuff is better for foods that might lose shape over time in a pressure canner or something like that. The other thing you can do, this is the pro tip, is honey can be used to preserve food, and things like fruits and meats and things like that. And you can do honey before you can them and add a little bit more shelf life to them. But honey has natural acidity and antibacterial properties that kind of contribute to this preservation capability. So you can actually coat meat and extend the shelf life a bit because honey is just naturally high in acid that kills a lot of this microbial growth that's on meat. So there's a couple different ways to do that, and there's some great recipes. But when I do canning, I incorporate the honey technique into that, and it does add to the shelf life a little bit. Without canning, you can use honey and extend the life of certain foods. It will extend the life of meat a little bit, both like jerky, smoked meat, and raw meat. But also you can use it to ferment things that are going to go bad really quick, like fruits and vegetables. Those don't last very long. You can ferment them using honey, and then they'll last a lot longer. So honey is a really cool trick to add into that.
And you can ferment honey on its own and make mead, and mead
Yes.
is awesome.
You are going to be very popular in the apocalypse if you know how to make mead. 100%. No, and I know you've done that a little bit, Chris. I haven't yet, and I'm staring at these jars of honey going. I just have to try it. My neighbor took a stab at it. As one of his friends at work did it, took my honey down there, gave him a quart, and turned it into like a gallon of cold garbage. It was disgusting, and now I'm just sort of gun shy because it's honey, and you're using an entire quart of honey to do it. So if you don't do it right, then I'm just scared of you losing the honey because I can use that for other stuff.
Yes, and there is a caution to honey and canning and everything like that. Like, be careful of those temperatures, because if you're
Yeah.
not and you get a crack in a glass, or if you make something too hot, too cold,
Hmm.
too quickly, getting a palm full of shattered
It
mason
can
jar
explode.
glass,
Yep.
eh, that's gonna suck.
Absolutely. No, it definitely can explode. You're dealing with glass and pressure and liquids, so just be careful of that. Follow the instructions.
The mead that we're kind of working on is still fermenting, but took raw Oregon honey and dumped it into a gallon jar with water, yeast, some orange peel, and some cranberry. And
Ooh,
so waiting on that to finish its process, and we're gonna have hopefully this summer some orange cranberry mead.
that sounds delicious. Yeah, I'll send you some honey when I pull it. It's generally September-ish is when I pull the frames and kind of see how much the bees decided to give us that year. So I'll make sure to put you on the list.
Nice. Speaking of jars, though, let's talk about the next thing, which is pickling.
Ooh, I like
I
pickling.
like pickles.
Some people like pickles, some people do not like pickles.
Yes, and pickling is traditionally done in one of two ways, either with a vinegar solution or through fermentation brining. Both prevent bacteria from forming, and they do add to shelf life. Some methods require kind of a pre-processing brining, which is basically a salt bath that draws out extra moisture and it firms up the food before pickling it. You see that with crispy pickles. They've gone through a brine bath to pull the excess water out before they actually get pickled.
Oh,
And when you do that, like I said, there's two different ways. There's vinegar and there's fermentation brining. So using vinegar, like apple cider vinegar or similar, you pretty much just use a cold canning process. You add the food to the jar, add the vinegar solution, sugar, spices, whatever you really want. If you want to throw in habanero peppers along with it to make it spicy pickles, go for it. It's fair game. If you're using a fermentation brine, it's almost exclusively a concentrated salt bath, which produces this lactic acid, the same stuff that makes your legs burn after a long walk. But as that lactic acid interacts with your chosen food, it destroys any bacteria, and it can you can kind of monitor that progress as it cures, because you're looking for small bubbles in the jars. But here's the really cool thing. You can pickle almost anything. I've had pickled eggs, pickled beets, pickled radishes, pickled pig's feet, pickled herring, and of course, pickles. One of my favorite things is actually pickled red onion as kind of a sandwich topper. It goes great with pulled pork. It's amazing. Uh, but according to one source I found, anything can be salted and pickled from plant roots to mammoth carcasses. End quote. And I didn't
whoa.
know how I felt about the mammoth carcasses, but they're right. I don't know if I really want to try mammoth jerky quite yet, but that could make a hell of an idea for like a vendor snack at a Utah hockey club game. Now that they've found a name and a mascot and a logo.
Oh, so yeah, I'm telling you, like a like spicy habanero pickle mammoth jerky garnished Bloody Mary made with the Vienna sausage water. I'm telling you.
All you.
Sounds legit. I'm in. The one thing about pickling that I will say is, there are the two different kinds. The fermentation kind is like a superfood. It's like good for you, good for you. It's on the list. It's like kimchi. It's one of those superfoods, and you'll know the difference if you're going to buy pickles, because the one made with vinegar is the one you see on the shelf, and the one made with that fermentation brine is the one in the cooler section. And like they always say, right? Where's the healthy food at the supermarket? It's around the perimeter, right? Where the coolers are. So that's the
Right.
that's the good one. If you can do it, that's honestly a superfood. That's one of those really, really good foods. There's a lot of the active cultures and um,
The
yeah, just
probiotics and
all the
everything like that.
probiotics, all that stuff. Yeah, so this is actually pretty good for you. Um, but you did mention salt a little bit. This is the easy one. This leads me to the next one, which is just salt. You can salt a lot of stuff. So let's talk about salt preservation. If you remember, salt was like my go-to dollar prep in episode 2. You can buy salt in bulk for like cheap money. So this is something you can have on hand now and just have it when you need it. I buy like rock salt, like road salt, just to, salt the driveway when it snows or when it gets icy. And of course it says you can't eat it, but it's only cuz it's dirty. It's not cuz it's like poison. You could wash that salt, and I'm telling you, in a pinch I would absolutely use it. That doesn't really scare me that much, but salt is a necessary part of almost all living things diets, right? It just is, and it provides the electrolytes that are critical for muscle function. But here's the cool part about it. It's also basically natural desiccant. So in fact, most microbes die in a 10% saltwater solution because they dry out and it sort of tears up their cell structure. So making salt a really good way to preserve things. But we aren't talking about table salt here unless you have like a ton of it. Sea salt, or they call it packing salt, has more gaps in the salt grains. So you can usually fill more volume of your storage container using it rather than regular table salt, or like the pink Himalayan sea salt. If you think about that, remember that we talked about the pink Himalayan sea salt. It's good for you. It's got all these dissolved solids, but it's really, really big chunks of salt. And so it makes it harder to fill all those little gaps and cracks and nooks and crannies.
See,
So
now all I can think of is the end of the movie Office Space, where Milton is sitting on the beach and he says, I asked for no salt in my margarita. There are big grains of salt. Put strychnine in the guacamole.
That's a good Milton. I'm telling you, man, I do the on all of the drinks that require a salted rim, the Himalayan sea salt. It's just cool, man. It's like it's got like a little it's got a good presentation to it. But the key is packing in the salt as tightly as possible around your food items, because you want to minimize that air exposure. That's the big thing. So keep in mind, as salt gets wet, it dissolves, and it can form a sort of salt film over the surface, which pulls all of the excess moisture out of the food. And
Just
this
like
is
a brining solution would,
yeah,
right?
it's like a brine solution, and this is actually what preserving it is. Similar to how like your dehydrator works, but on a much longer time scale. This is quite literally an ancient method of preserving food, and it's been around in all history, all the way back to like the Neolithic period around 6000 BC. From the documentation I was able to find, this is the way it was done. Like back in the day, this is just how you preserve. You took down that big woolly mammoth. You couldn't eat it all right then, so you had to find a way to preserve it. And the way they did that was with salt. Salt is pretty prevalent. You can make salt if you have ocean. You can make salt, and like we said, like 90% of their population lives by the ocean. So
Yes. And
yeah,
they
you
still
can get it.
use salt packing today.
Yeah.
Like when they're shipping seafood, some types of seafood
Mhm.
are still packed in salt.
I actually ordered some capers. My Italian grandmother had this amazing recipe, and it involved capers, and I had to order some Italian capers, and they came totally packed in salt, like so grossly packed in salt that I was like, "Oh, you have to rinse this off, right? Like you don't just toss this in there," because it was, yeah, things are still packed in salt today. So if you have to live in an area of the world with naturally forming salt, like salt caves, you are sitting on top of a jackpot during SHTF. If you live by the ocean, then obviously you need energy to turn that seawater into salt. but still, same thing. You've got a commodity that is as old as time. So these are all over the world, usually in like the semi-arid areas like Chile, Germany, Romania, Poland, Iran, several countries in Africa. But if you're in North America, your best bet is actually those. What's the name of the caverns in that state park in Arizona?
I think it's Karchner,
Yeah, Karchner, right? Exactly.
Karchner
Um,
Caverns.
yep. Or if you're in Utah, right, you just scrape salt off the ground because it's everywhere. Utah is very salt heavy state. One of the cool sciencey things here is if you boil the water completely until it evaporates, you'll be left with nearly pure salt at the bottom of your pan. So that's really good for packing use. Actually, it's funny, down on the Oregon coast, it's like the end of the Oregon Trail. And there's Fort Clatsop, and then a little south of Fort Clatsop, there's this uh, little monument where Lewis and Clark's expedition would pull seawater out and boil it, and the giant cast iron pots are still there. These massive cast iron cauldrons. They would take the seawater, dump it in there, and they basically had a permanent fire going where they were just constantly harvesting sea salt, because that's what you did. That's how you stayed alive, is you were packing everything with salt to preserve it so you could make it through the winter. And that monument is actually still there it's either in Seaside or Cannon Beach, Oregon. I forget which.
That's really cool. That is now on my travel list because I think that would be really cool to follow the Oregon Trail all the way to where it ended.
There's a couple of cool ones. There's a Fort Vancouver in Vancouver, Washington, that still has like people dress up in the old timey clothes, and there's a trading post there. And then the next winter was on the Oregon coast in Astoria, and that's Fort Clatsop. And they do the same thing. Like grade school kids do trips out there, and they teach you how to make candles out of suet and things like that. But all that stuff is still there, and salt, it was just a huge piece of that.
Kind of like Andrew when we had him on about he does, the plains living during the 1800s, very similar concept, but different part of the country, different part of the world, different survival techniques.
When he's in character, he's eating a whole lot of salted stuff.
Now, if you don't live next to one of these naturally forming salt caves, or if you aren't wanting to scrape salt off the ground where they do land speed record attempts with jet fuel, like the Great Salt Flats, I do want to touch on another really, really ancient technique. This one dates back as far as the Paleolithic era, around the time that humans discovered the art of making fire. And I'm talking about smoking. Now, smoking foods, especially meats, not only extends their shelf life, but also it can add some unique flavors to the meat. And a good smoked brisket is something that will be highly sought after during the apocalypse. But we're talking about preservation instead of that super juicy barbecue. So here's kind of how smoking works.
I like it.
Right? Smoking food does three things. It dehydrates the food because of the heat, removing the water necessary for bacteria growth. The smoke itself also contains what are called bacteriostatic chemicals. They permeate the food and prevent further growth. And then it partially ferments the fat in the meat, which transforms fats into this extremely high energy dense substance. And it's great for quick energy, sustained energy. But there are two basic ways to smoke something similar to canning. It's hot smoking and cold smoking. And in hot smoking, you build these drying racks directly over the flames of your fire and add wet wood chips and just really let it billow. The more smoke, the better. Wet chips are going to smolder for a really long time rather than burn. So hot smoking is what we normally see at those backyard barbecues. You're ensuring that internal temperature of the brisket is sufficient for cooking through, and not necessarily doing it for long-term storage. Cold smoking, however, this is where you build a chimney and let the smoke actually cool as it leaves the fire. So you're doing the same thing as hot smoking, but removing the heat from the drying process. And if you are cold smoking, you end up with a meat that is less fatty and more shelf stable, but it can take like 5 times longer to actually get it to cure. And airflow is important here because if you just let it sit without any air moving, that meat will rot before it smokes. So cold smoking can give you fish and meat that is stable for months at a time without any sort of refrigeration. You can even smoke cheese in this way, which is fantastic on sandwiches. If you've this episode is making me hungry.
I know. We've been doing a
Like,
couple of these lately. We're like
oh,
the food episodes. I'm like, that sounds delicious. I want mammoth in my Bloody Mary.
all right, mammoth with smoked Gouda.
Oh, I'm in. I didn't know about the whole difference in smoking because I do a lot of like smoked meats in the backyard smoker. And of course, I'm never like that's going to last any longer because it's smoked, but I get it. That's like a hot smoking process. And what you're talking about, the cold smoking process, that's really cool. I didn't realize that was the process. But you see this on a lot of the Discovery Channel shows like Alone where people are trying to preserve meat for a very, very long time. It's about getting that smoke way cooler in coating the meat, but it takes a very long time to do it. Like this is a more than an overnight thing even.
Right. And that 14-hour smoked brisket that's super juicy and tender all the way through, the stuff that you get at professional barbecue restaurants and things like that, that's hot smoked. Now
Right.
extend that 14 hours by 5 to 10 times as long for the cold
Exactly.
smoking. Now you've got something that's going to be a long-term lasting food source instead of a single meal with
Right.
yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, yeah. I would like to try that. I get that. So I guess you would need a big kind of longer chimney area. So you're getting smoke directed at the meat, but it's got to take time to cool down before it gets there. So way different than your traditional backyard smoker. You'd have to rig something up.
And if you look at some of the kind of medieval era plans for smokehouses, right? They had a large area for a fire, and then they had all of the smoke directing around in kind of a chimney, and the smokehouse was above it with a concrete floor
Oh,
or a stone floor.
yeah.
And the heat from the fire was going up. Have you ever seen those candles that they use the heat from the candle to spin the little wooden
Of course.
propeller and
Yeah.
it makes things dance or
Little
whatever?
Dutch dudes dance around their little lederhosen or something.
Exactly.
Yep.
Same thing, but the heat on that fan was turning the smoking racks through that smoke above it. And so they got
Oh,
airflow, they got constant rotation on their meat. They were smart about it.
that's genius. So then the airflow would keep the moisture from building up on there, and then you're less likely to have rotten meat.
Bingo.
That's really cool. No, I'd never seen that. See, I want to go build all this stuff. That's amazing. That's really cool.
You have fun with that.
I mean, just oftentimes you wonder how people stayed alive thousands of years ago without like an iPhone, and you're like, oh man, they did some really cool stuff. But that leads me into another preservation method, which you hit on without even knowing it. Once you've smoked all of your meat and your cheese, what do you do with all that burnt ash? So, did you know that you can actually preserve food with wood ash, just like salt? Actually, um,
Really?
yeah, actually, it's specifically wood ash, not charcoal ash or things like that. The ash created by wood fires has a ton of potassium salts and these other chlorides in it, which can act just like salt for preservation. In fact, it works so well that the Amish use it as like garden starts and field starts every year without any refrigeration or power. Now, the one thing
Really?
about this, yeah, the one thing about this is the wood is specific. Um, the softwoods, just by nature, are a lot more poison. There's more poisonous resins, things that are very, very sappy, like your pines and your firs, just have a lot more natural poisons in them. And the hardwoods, like The maples are awesome. Oaks are awesome. They're very, very prevalent hardwoods are a lot better for this because those ashes don't contain any traces of these poisons that softer woods have.
You're
Some
talking like
stuff,
hickory smoked chip. It's
yeah,
hickory smoked chips versus just the normal Douglas fir pine that you cut down into your backyard.
that's exactly right. Yeah, hickory's awesome. Mesquite is awesome. It depends on where you live, right? We're talking about regionally specific, but regionally there's hardwoods everywhere. Yeah, you're right. In the south, it's going to be your hickories and your mesquites. In the northern part of the country, it's going to be a lot more of the oaks and the maples, but those are just a lot better than the firs and pines. There's even the cedars. There's a cedar cousin. What's the name of it? I always forget. It's like the one that uh, they would poison people with back in the Greeks would poison people with one of those particular softwoods because they were just really poisoned. But anyway, with wood ash, by packing ashes into a box, you can layer in tomatoes, fruits, just about any vegetable except potatoes. Potatoes they'll grow like wildfire in it because they'll just send the roots down and destroy the rest of the food. But
Potatoes will grow in the dark
they'll
too.
grow potatoes are crazy. Potatoes are like cockroaches of the vegetable kingdom. They're the only thing that's going to survive nuclear fallout. It's going to be just cockroaches and potatoes in the dark everywhere.
Hey, that's how
So
Matt
yeah,
Damon survived on Mars alone.
that's right. It was potatoes. He was just eating potatoes forever. So God, that sounds terrible. But the key is with this wood ash packing is to preserve food items far enough away from each other that the ash can get in between them and act kind of as this airtight barrier on the surface of the food. So you can get the same effects of salt packing without salt flavor. So instead, you get like burnt tree flavor, I guess, but it can be easily washed off before you eat it. You want to make sure that your ashes are as dry as possible before doing this. Otherwise, you can get moisture in, which leads to like rot and clumping and all that kind of stuff. That would prevent an airtight seal. But the Amish do this. The Amish will, they'll do this kind of with their last harvest of the year, especially with tomatoes, and then have them through the winter and then plant the remaining seeds the next spring. So this is just a very cool old school way to do things that I think we just don't think about anymore. But in some kind of TEOTWAWKI event, yeah, that would be the way to go.
That really is fantastic. Ash tomatoes. I love it.
Ash tomatoes. I'm going to garnish my Bloody Mary with it.
I've
Ooh,
been to a restaurant where they used every part of the plant for everything. And so they even the green tops off of the carrots that they were using, they would kind of chop those up and then turn those to ash and use that as a garnish. And it was actually pretty good. It was carrot top ash garnish. It was interesting. So
hemlock. Hemlock was what I was thinking of. That's one of those
I was trying to think of what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's how they poisoned Socrates. They made him drink hemlock. It's like it's a very cedary looking wood, but yeah, hemlock is super poison. So a lot of the softwoods, the cedars, the pines, the firs, the hemlocks, there's a lot of just poison resins and stuff in them. But hemlock was the one I was trying to think of. That's something the Greeks would poison everybody with that shit.
I can definitely see that being a problem for smoking your meat is
Yeah.
smoking it with hemlock, and you take a bite of your mammoth jerky and conk out.
Yeah. Don't do
Gone.
that. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
There is one more thing that I want to bring up here. And this is one of those things you really have to be careful with. So we're talking about food preservation without refrigeration. At this point, we've gone way past having electricity. Caves and deep water submersion. So
Ooh.
a lot of people have root cellars. You brought up root cellars. Those are pretty much just man-made caves. They're great for storage because they do stay cool year-round. But they're not generally temperature controlled. And any sort of temperature control, you have to have power for. So storing any sort of raw or unprocessed anything in them, you might get a week or two of extended life, but not much more than if it were on your countertop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
And that's where putting things in the root cellar or cave is great for if it is smoked, pickled, dehydrated, freeze-dried foods, but not for anything raw or unprocessed. Once the temperature inside goes above 40 degrees, you're in that danger zone for food safety. You get outside of the refrigeration zone for too long and now it's spoiled. And the same thing applies to deep water submersion, which is putting your food in kind of a waterproof bag or a box, and then you sink it down to where the water temperature can keep it cool for you. But again, unless you have a way to monitor that temperature remotely, you're going to need a scuba tank to find out what temps your food is holding at. And not to mention, if you are using deep water or a naturally forming cave or something like that, there may be other animals interested in what they smell. So a curious bear is going to wreck you inside of the confines of a cave when you go down to get a jar of your homemade jam. So unless you're sure that that temperature is going to stay lower than 40 degrees, it's not necessarily worth the risk to use a natural cave. Does that make
Or,
sense?
yeah, how about this? So then you just, when you sink your food into this uh, deep water area to keep it cold, you include a Coors Light can, and then you know if the mountains are blue, that your food's still okay.
Well, and here's where that gets tricky is how fast do the mountains turn back to white instead
Oh,
of
good
blue?
call. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about Coors Light can technology to know like if the Blue Mountains are actually like if that's science or not. I've talked about this a little bit just to know if your freezers at home have failed, and this is the water glass trick we've talked about where you take just a small frozen put water in Tupperware, freeze it, and then put a coin on top. A penny is nice because you can see it easier, and then if you ever open your freezer and that penny is now on the bottom of that top Tupperware frozen, you know that it got above freezing in your freezer, and it's a really good way to know if when you lost power, if your freezer's got too warm and your food is going to spoil. That's a really cool hack to do.
And that one's a great one, especially if you do have to evacuate for a natural
Sure.
disaster or if you lose power during natural disaster. If you've already got that one set up, it will tell you, nope, I got above
Yep.
the freezing point. The
For
penny is
too
at the
long.
bottom of the glass. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one too.
And all of these food preservation techniques, they do take some sort of energy to really get started. You have to start the fire in order to smoke something. You have to boil the water in order to can something. You have to get the vinegar or build your brine solution in order to pickle, all sorts of things like that. So these are not immediate food preparation techniques for when you're hungry right now. This is the long-term storage stuff. And just understanding these techniques can kind of help you build your long-term storage plans. Are you going to save up and get that freeze dryer, or are you comfortable with the canning process? Things like that. Where can you balance this? It does save you money in the extreme long run if you're freeze drying everything, but that's a huge startup cost. $200 canning kit might be better, but you're not going to get as much lifespan out of it. So where's your balance?
Yeah, that's a good point. Just while we're doing this, I thought about like I'm in egg season right now. Like I got 9 eggs yesterday. Like I just can't eat that many eggs, and so I'm actually thinking maybe I'll haul the dehydrator out and try my luck at powdered eggs. That actually sounds really cool. So I think that's a cool um, exercise I can try just to see if I can preserve some of the eggs. Because yeah, I get into a situation where I try to give them away as much as I can, but eventually, yeah, the eggs will go bad, and I'm getting into that season where I have an abundance of stuff coming out of the garden, and this is a way to preserve some of that. Throw some of this in the dehydrator and see if I can make the fruit leather and those kinds of things. So I think I'm going to try that this year.
And it also opens up your seasonality of foods. If you want, pears in the springtime for your afternoon ice cream or whatever, you've got them. You just need to figure out a way to get the pears to go from harvest all the way through.
Right.
So now
Yeah.
we're looking at preservation.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great point.
So I think that about wraps this one up, AC. Do you have any other food preservation tips, tricks, hacks, or suggestions?
No, this was awesome. I actually learned quite a bit on this one, and yeah, you did a ton of research for this, so I appreciate that. This was a good one.
This one was really fun to research, but I learned a lot going through it. I've probably got 80 tabs that I bookmarked on my computer, but I think that is going to about wrap us up. Definitely let us know what you think of these food preservation techniques. Send us an email to stakeholderprepping@gmail.com. Visit our blog. We do have links to a lot of these Amazon products that you can buy if you're looking into maybe extending your food preservation. Definitely join us next week. We're going to continue our adventure as always. And until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder.